and almost 4 lakh metric tons of mutton every year. So such a huge demand we have for meat. And Kerala in particular, we have a lot of animals coming from other states. So all these animals which come from other states may not exactly pass your anti-mortem inspection, because those animals which are fit for slaughter means those animals should be healthy. It should not have any running down condition like cachexia or any sort of such medical conditions. But many of the time we find animals in skin and bones for a sort of visit. So I'm not detailing too much. Probably Dr. Vasudevan is the best person to keep you awake this afternoon, because after a sumptuous lunch, people try to doze off in the afternoon, and this is a real good topic not to doze off, because the best person who can make you awake is Dr. Vasudevan. Before I hand over the mic to Dr. Vasudevan, I request my co-chair, Dr. Remya, assistant professor, to give her thoughts on this, and then we'll start the lecture by Dr. Vasudevan. Dr. Remya, please.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon to the speaker, chair, and all the dignitaries and participants. Today's topic, meat inspection in India, is definitely a need of the hour, because in India, more than 70% of the people are consuming the meat. So definitely we should know in which way we can protect our meat. So I think Dr. Sir, the speaker, respected speaker, definitely will elaborate all the aspects of meat inspection, and he will enlighten the participants. Thank you. Now I will hand over the mic to the speaker.
Yeah, Dr. Vasudevan, you can start your lecture.
Thank you, Irshad. Thank you, Justin, for a generous introduction. And I thank the chair, Dr. Nandakumar, as well as Dr. Remya, for giving an excellent launchpad to start this session. The topic of the session is the meat inspection in the Indian milieu, the challenges and strategies. So there is a substantial body of evidence which shows that meat inspection is of momentous significance in ensuring the safety of meat, or in ensuring the safety of the food vended in the domestic as well as the international market. There is also evidence which suggests that proper meat inspection, if conducted, will ensure not only the safety of the meat, but it will ensure the health of the human population in general, as well as it will ensure animal health, as well as it will minimize the impact of the meat industry on the environment. So there is substantial body of evidence or demonstration, or evidence to demonstrate that these are true. But coming to the meat inspection in the Indian context, we are rather apprehensive of the outcomes like this. That is, there are regulations, there is data, and there are a lot of research outcomes correlating the proper meat inspection with human health, foodborne diseases, and all those things. But whether the current meat inspection regimen or the processes that are taking place, if at all taking place in some of the slaughterhouses in India as well as in Kerala, whether they are sufficient to meet the expectations of safety of the meat, whether they are meeting the animal welfare aspects, whether they contribute in any way to maintain the animal health of the population, animal health of the state or the country, or whether they mitigate the risk of occupational safety among meat handlers, butchers, as well as the veterinarians. So the correlation is very clear, but the outcomes are not satisfactory. That is what is the current context. So if you see a data from 2016, a survey from 2010 to 16, many bacterial pathogens, of which Campylobacter, Shigella, all these bacterial pathogens have been implicated in the most highest number of foodborne illnesses in the Southeast Asia, which is a study by the WHO. And in the Indian context, this is the data brought out by the National Center for Disease Control, NCDC. So they collected this data from the Integrated Disease Surveillance Project, including ISDP. So we can see that in most of the outbreaks, the food items implicated were not meat. Only in one case you can see the meat being implicated, and in the next page also you can see one of the cases implicated salmonella and poultry products were attributed to this type of food poisoning or foodborne illness. So why I am showing these two slides is that when the risk of improper meat inspection or handing over improperly inspected or highly contaminated meat to the public is a reality, but the documented evidence of the attributions or the correlations between the reported outbreaks between the reported outbreaks and the foods, especially the muscle foods, is much less. And there are many reasons for this, because it can be due to underreporting. It can be due to the facts that in many cases the exact organism which causes the disease has not been followed, has not been detected. So there are many reasons but this is the reality. But if you take the data, inspection is improper, it is inadequate, that is there, but the implications of the foodborne illnesses to meat in the milieu of the data that is available is much less. So why I am highlighting this is that largely, even though the meat inspection is inadequate, largely the meat-borne diseases, especially the foodborne diseases or acute diarrheal diseases, are grossly unreported or underreported in the Indian context. So now we are coming to the actual part of the presentation. That is, having said all this, we have to raise the question of whether the present meat inspection system is sufficient to address the issue. That is whether it is sufficient to address the issue of the bacterial pathogens that we have just seen, that is Yersinia or Salmonella or those things, whether the current meat inspection system prevalent in India or in Kerala is sufficient to address the issue of foodborne diseases due to highly pathogenic bacterial pathogens. So, and to address this issue, and what are the challenges ahead of the meat industry or the regulatory agencies, and what are the possible strategies? So that is what we are going to discuss. So we can generally say that sanitary control of slaughter animals and meat is the generalized meaning of the term meat inspection. So it includes both the control of the diseases within the large animals which are destined for slaughter, as well as the inspection or the assurance of the safety of the meat. And generally the objectives will include removal of grossly abnormal products from the food chain or the meat chain, then prevention of distribution of the infected meat that could give rise to disease in human beings, and assistance in detection and eradication of certain diseases of livestock, and to check the efficiency of the practices of slaughter and dressing, and to protect the meat handlers from occupational hazards. So these are the broad objectives of the meat inspection. So in meeting each of these objectives, are skeptical whether the current meat inspection is sufficient to remove the grossly abnormal product from the meat chain, because it is grossly inefficient. The fact is that even if the meat inspector is detecting a grossly infected or abnormal portion of the carcass, he in most of the cases he will not be able to ensure that the meat is not going back into the food chain, because there is no facility for seizing or containment of the contaminated or the condemned product. Then prevention of the distribution of the infected meat that could give rise to, so that is also not effectively satisfied, or that objective is also not effectively met. Then assistance in the detection and eradication of certain diseases of livestock. So as we know, the cattle markets as well as abattoirs are the largest congregations of animals where the infectious or infectious diseases are first reported in the country or within the state. But there is no mechanism by which there is communication of these incidents of the disease back to the disease control authorities or back to the animal husbandry authorities. So there is no mechanism of feedback or notifying the authorities. So in that case also, the assistance for detection and eradication does not happen in the current scenario. then to check the efficiency of slaughter and carcass dressing. So you are already aware that the facilities for slaughter and dressing of the animals in the state or within the country are quite appalling. That is, most of these slaughterhouses have been constructed in the pre-independence or the peri-independent era, and the number of animals that were envisaged to be slaughtered in such facilities were much less compared to the present day rate of slaughter. So there is gross infrastructural deficiencies, which usually makes the monitoring of slaughter and dressing operations meaningless, because most of the facilities do not have any proper infrastructure and protect meat handlers from communicable diseases. So these are the broad objectives, and whether the present system is meeting or able to satisfy these objectives is quite questionable. Okay, then just have a brief on the inspection and post-mortem inspection, which are two components of the meat inspection procedures. And coming to the ante-mortem inspection of animals. So as we know, it is the examination of the food animal at least 24 hours prior to slaughter of the animals. And the significance of ante-mortem examination is that it represents 50% of the total meat inspection procedures, and some of the ante-mortem, some of the disease conditions are detectable only during ante-mortem examination. So within the Indian context, this is most significant because many of the disease conditions are detectable only during ante-mortem examination, and ante-mortem findings and the post-mortem crew, that is about the findings within the ante-mortem, many of the conditions go unnoticed. So this is especially significant. And the objectives of the ante-mortem, as we know, it is protection of public health, animal health and animal welfare. It is protecting the public health by segregating those animals which are obviously infected by some pathological conditions. It is protecting the animal health by observing some of the disease conditions or contagious diseases within the animals which are destined for slaughter and notifying such conditions to the health authorities. And animal welfare, so whether the animals have been properly treated or whether the welfare measures have been properly observed during the transport or handling of the animals. So all these can be monitored during the ante-mortem examination. So regarding the animal welfare measures and all, we have many other deficiencies which I will elaborate later. So these are the general objectives, and coming to the specific objectives, you can see animals which are not having any contagious diseases are eliminated, of course. Then only human slaughter methods are usually followed, and approval of only normal rested animal. So say for example, you can see that in most of the slaughterhouses, if you go by the road in the evening, you can see that especially on Saturdays and all, you can see that so many animals are waiting in the slaughter. There is no proper layerage or a covered area or a roof area for keeping the animals to protect them from rain or from inclement weather. So you can see that all these animals are very sluggish and they are very, very dull and sluggish, which is simply due to the fact that they cannot be affected by any disease condition. They are simply suffering from the transport stress. So a simple examination, a simple ante-mortem examination will actually eliminate or which actually prevent those animals from being slaughtered and resulting marketing of low quality meat to the customer can be minimized. So even that intervention is not happening. So without having proper rest period given to the animals, say within 4 hours, the animals may be slaughtered, and that period is insufficient. So what I am telling is that only, excuse me, some disturbance is coming. Please keep the mic mute.
Hello, please, all participants, please note, please mute your mics. Please mute your mics. Please don't cause a disturbance to the speaker, please. Yeah. Dr. Vasudevan, please continue.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So, all animals are taken for slaughter, so that can be ensured. And only slaughter methods can also be ensured by proper ante-mortem examination. Say simply, for example, if you take of the animals from the lairage to a slaughter box, to a slaughterhouse, that is, it may be, sometimes it may be a few meters long, sometimes it may be two adjacent. So this period is a period where most type of or most forceful movement of the animals take place. The animals actually hesitate to move, or they resist to move, and so much of force will be used for moving the animals to the slaughterhouses. So during this movement, if you take the developed countries, there are well characterized methods for stress-free or voluntary movement of the animal, whereas that is not being followed in slaughterhouses in India. So what happens is that so much of force is being implicated upon the animal to move forward to slaughterhouse, which will result in very rough handling of the animals. So if a proper antemortem or antemortem staff is there, they can make sure that the animals are moved without any force on the animal, and voluntary movement and the natural behavioral patterns of the animal can be utilized for moving the animal without implicating much force. So that can be ensured if there is any antemortem examination. And of course, the sixth objective, that to reduce the contamination of the killing floor. So that is very important, because excessively dirty animals or animals which are excessively soiled, it is a common observation in most of the service slaughterhouses within the state. That is, excessively dirty animals entering the slaughterhouse. So here one point is that the animals which are excessively dirty, usually if water is available for washing the animal, there will be washing of the animal will be done in some of the situations. So actually this is more hazardous than leaving the animal excessively soiled and dry. If it is dry, it is less hazardous, because if you are washing the animal's hide or the skin will be too wet, and a too wet hide will be transferring more number of bacteria to the carcass than a dry hide. So if there is no sufficient time elapsed between washing and the slaughter process, enabling the animal to get dry, it is better to leave the animal dusted itself, that is somewhat soiled itself, because the studies have shown that transfer of bacteria from the dry hide to the carcass will be less. So excessive soiling and soiling of the killing floor, especially the slaughter floor, equipment and personnel, can be minimized. Proper antemortem examination. Of course, in the detection of notifiable diseases, so notifiable diseases have notified to the higher authorities, and that will result in containment of the disease by proper action taken at the higher ups. So these are the specific objectives if you take the antemortem examination, and I have also highlighted some of the practical points at each step which can be adopted. The requirements for antemortem examination, there should be a lairage, which is in many cases in the service slaughterhouses in Kerala or in India are less well equipped. In many places there is no covered area. In many places the floor is not cleanable, that is, you cannot clean the floor, it will be just soiled and all. So there will not be any permanent flooring, so it is not possible to clean the floor, and there may not be sufficient space. In many places, in many situations, the animals will be so much congested that the animals will not be able to lie down, because lying down of animals is a natural behavioral part from the animals awaiting slaughter, especially in the case of cattle. Cattle take too much, much more time to get settled, and once they get settled, they will lie down. It is just the opposite of pigs. Pigs will take less time to settle down, and they will. You can see that the pigs are roaming around in the lairage very much vociferously, but within half an hour or 1 hour, they will lie down happily and they will be taking rest. So they get excited easily and they calm down also easily. Whereas in the case of cattle, they take more time to settle down. So there should be lying down within the lairages. There should be sufficient space for holding the animals. So lairage is an important component, and as I have told earlier, the time of antemortem examination 24 hours prior to the slaughter of the animals, and if the slaughter does not happen within the next 24 hours, the antemortem examination has to be repeated. So actually, as I told earlier, in many places, the antemortem examination is not happening, and if at all it is happening, there is not much time provided to the animals for taking rest. Immediately after unloading the animals, or within few hours, the animals are taken for slaughter. Then the person is a qualified veterinarian, and there should be simple medical equipments and some restraint equipments, and these are the instruments which should be available for the antemortem examination. Okay, so coming to the the person or the qualified veterinarian. So this is a huge impediment with respect to the enforcement of the meetings, especially in antemotum examination procedures. Because in many of these slaughterhouses in Kerala or in India, there are no regularly employed veterinarians. Most of the places, some veterinarians are given additional duty of inspecting the animals. So what happens is that in many places, the antemotum examination is not happening properly. Postmortem examination also the same situation arises, because the veterinarian additional duty of inspection may not be getting time to inspect the animals. There may be 60 or 80 animals to be inspected on a busy day like Saturday. So in many places, it is not happening efficiently. So dearth of qualified veterinary service is a big issue in the case of proper antemotum examination. Then the procedure for antemotum examination, I'm going a bit fast because I will not be able to complete. The procedure for antemotum examination is very clear. That is, the antemotum examination is nothing but a general clinical examination, and for a general clinical examination, we have to examine the animal both at the rest as well as in the motion. You have to examine the animals both the sides, and you have to separate the animals which you suspect of some conditions, and you have to examine the animal in detail. So what we are discussing here is that whether these requirements can be met with the current infrastructural as well as regulatory facilities that is available in the slaughterhouses. The answer is a big no, because there will not be any facility for grouping the animals into small groups. Say, for example, cattle need to be grouped into 10 or 15 animals so that you can inspect that group easily. So that facility may not be there in most of the service slaughterhouses, and there may not be any facility for isolating the animal. An isolation pen may not be available. And if the animals are examined as a large group, say for example 40 or 50 animals, what happens is that the animals will huddle together and they will form a group which are situated at the center, cannot be inspected. So they will usually miss the inspector's eye and they will go unnoticed. So if the animals cannot be grouped into smaller groups, it is not possible to inspect the animals. So these facilities are not generally available in most of the slaughterhouses. So the procedure is also not clearly met. Okay. And along with that, these observations, making these observations is also becoming very difficult. So say, for example, the cleanliness of the animal, state of nutrition, posture and gait. So say, for example, I will tell you, if an animal is affected with mastitis, which is a very common reason for disposal of the animals by the farmers in the Indian context, especially in Kerala, maybe mastitis, then metritis, all these situations result in disposal of the animals because of the loss of milk production. So in that case, the examination of the animal for the gait as well as the posture assumes significance, because in many cases, mastitis is associated with a pain or a painful lesion or a pain in the legs, and that will result in alterations in the gait of the animal. So that observation may be missed in most of the situations. Then, for example, reaction to external stimuli. So all these observations cannot be effectively with the current antemotum inspection facilities that are available in the slaughterhouses. So these are the differences during the antemotum examination. So here I am showing these decisions just to highlight the fact that just imagine what will be the fate of the unfit animal in the Indian context. An animal that is declared as unfit for slaughter, they will not be taken back by the butcher. And usually what happens is that these unfit animals will be slaughtered in an illegal premise outside the service slaughterhouse area, and the meat will enter the supply chain. So that is the general thing that is happening, because the person who is bringing the animal to the slaughterhouse has already paid for the animal. He cannot afford to going for disposal of the animal or discarding of the animal, because he has already paid for the animal. So unfit for slaughter, if you take that judgment, generally that meat will enter the food chain, which is extremely hazardous to the public health, to the health of the public. Okay. Then take the case for animals. If in a slaughterhouse, if the antemotum examination is happening, And if we are seeing one animal, one cow having a few abscesses on the surface of the body, generally the decision taken is suspect, because we cannot know whether that abscess has been generalized into the different systems of the animal. So we take the decision as suspect, and for effective control of the meat for inspection, this suspect observation has to be effectively communicated with the post-mortem staff. In the prevailing situations within India or within Kerala, what happens is that this communication does not happen, and even the ante-mortem examination or observation of an abscess may not be happening in most of the cases. So what I'm telling is that because of the deficiencies in the infrastructure and in the service available, as well as the regulatory enforcement, the proper decisions of the ante-mortem examination cannot be arrived at or cannot be implemented. Okay, so these are some of the general conditions which we detect at the meat technology unit, the slaughterhouse of the meat technology unit in Manuti, Thrissur, Kerala. We have always seen that it is always important to distinguish generalized pathological conditions from specific disease conditions. So, from a capacity building point of view, when we give training, when we give instructions to students or the veterinarians or other people, it is always stressed that we have to have clear-cut ideas about distinguishing generalized as well as local, generalized as well as specific pathological conditions. Say, for example, in most of the cases, we can see sometimes fever, then immaturity, septicemia. Then we will always see emaciation, which I have not included. So emaciation is a condition which is very tricky. That is, the guidelines state that if there is severe emaciation, the animal is unfit. Whereas if the emaciation is only moderate, the animals are fit for slaughter as a suspect. So how to differentiate in a live animal the severe emaciation and moderate emaciation? So we usually give the instructions like you palpate the lateral process of the lumbar vertebra. If the tip of the lateral process are very clear and very sharp, you can see that animal is severely emaciated and the animal is not fit for slaughter. Whereas if there is a slight covering of fat tissue, that is, if the lateral process appear to be curved, slightly curved, the animal is moderately emaciated, then you go for a detailed post-mortem examination and the animal is given the judgment as suspect. So what I am telling is that generalized pathological conditions are especially important with respect to the ante-mortem examination rather than the specific disease conditions. As far as the experience with respect to the meat technology unit is concerned, we have seen this situation. For example, this is a carcass of a bruised animal. The animal has been fallen when it was being transported. It was trampled upon by other animals, and there is extensive bruising. We have done the emergency slaughter of at 8 o'clock in the night. This is an example for casualty slaughter. The animal is having a chronic prolapse of vaginal prolapse, and the animal was taken for casualty slaughter. So these observations are also sometimes seen in during the ante-mortem examination. So I have detailed some of the problems in ante-mortem examination, and we will see the challenges. So what are the challenges that are usually that we are facing with respect to the ante-mortem examination part of the meat inspection? So first is confirmation that the animals, how to confirm the origin. Take the experience of the developed countries or in the developed economies. There is always a requirement for the ensuring the traceability of the animal or ensuring the farm of origin of the. This has also been included in the trade policy for export of buffalo meat as well as milk products also. Actually, NDDB has implemented one animal traceability system for recording the artificial insemination, the pregnancy, the production, everything. So for meat production, on a primary basis, this has also been developed by using RFID tags or radio frequency identification tags, but that has not been implemented to the full extent because of some issues. Okay, so one of the primary requirements for the during the ante-mortem examination is identification of the animal, and if the animal is not identified properly, it is not the individual animal, it is the group of animals. Say one consignment coming from one farm or at least from one area to be identified. Then only we can have a reporting system by which we can monitor for the diseases from that in the animals in that area, and we can give the feedback regarding the occurrence of such notifiable or contagious diseases in that area. So there is no such traceability systems, especially with respect to cattle and buffaloes. Whereas with respect to the pigs that are slaughtered in Kerala, as far as the experience of meat technology is concerned, we can clearly trace back the origin of the pigs, because of course it is only by the self-reporting by the farmers. It is not by using any methods for traceability, but we can clearly trace back the origin of the farms, and that is giving a huge benefit or huge confidence for the customers who purchase pork, because they know that the farm from which the animals have been procured is well known, and the history of the farm is well known, and the history of other farms in that area is also known. So any outbreaks of diseases, say especially the African swine fever that is happening nowadays, we are monitoring clearly about the occurrence of this disease in any geographical area from which we take the animals, and that traceability is assuring great confidence in the consumers. So animal challenge and identification and methods of identification will be adopted by the animal traders only if there is an incentive. So there should be an incentive, otherwise they will not resort to such practices. So there should be an incentive for proper identification of farm of origin, because that incentive should come in the form of higher prices, and that higher prices for the live animal should result in higher prices for the meat, and the consumer should actually afford this premium price for a traceability assured meat, and that is not happening in most of the situations. So the demand or the awareness from the side of the consumer is less, so he's paying the same price even if it is traceability assured or not assured. So that is one of the biggest impediment. Then another is so this is about the RFID tag. Then infrastructure and facilities. So initially I told you, in many of the places the infrastructure for anti-mortem examination is limited. That is, there is no covered area, there is no veterinary service facility for isolation of the animal, and as I initially told, live animal washing facilities cannot be there. If at all it is there, usually washing is carried out immediately before the process of slaughter of the animals, which is more hazardous. So infrastructure facilities need to be improved in the slaughterhouses. The detection of abnormalities. So this is what I initially told. Say there is a need to impart capacity building in the stakeholders about the detection of abnormalities. See, if you see these two pictures, one is severely emaciated and the right one is moderately emaciated. The left picture is taken to be slaughtered. It is unfit for slaughter, and the right one is as a suspect. It is to be slaughtered as a suspect animal. So such minute differences, how to arrive at such conclusions need to be clearly transferred to the inspecting people. So it is a challenge. That is, this capacity building in the correct lines is a challenge in this situation. Then I told you, implementation of AMI judgments, it is not properly happening. So I told you, even if the animal is categorized as unfit for slaughter, there is no mechanism to ensure that such animals are not slaughtered or the meat does not enter the food chain. So such mechanisms are not operational. So in most of the cases, these animals will be slaughtered illegally. Okay. And coming to another aspect which I have explained during the as the objectives of anti-mortem is the oversight of animal welfare requirements. So just imagine, I'm showing you some meat quality attributes in the next slide, and for which of these different meat quality attributes we give the highest priority. So is it the cost of the meat? No. Is it taste? Yes. Color? No. Shelf life? No. Safety? Yes. Okay. So I'm just tentatively listing these quality attributes. Here we can see that the middle two, that is color and shelf life. So color and shelf life of the meat are the most two important quality attributes which are affected by improper or rough, stressful pre-slaughter handling, especially in the case of large ruminants. So you can see that you have heard of this condition called dark firm dry meat, which is usually a consequence of prolonged stress experienced by the animal prior to slaughter. And this condition affects the color as well as the shelf life of the animal. So coming to the color, you can see this is the most attractive color, and dark red, reddish brown and brown. So usually this color deterioration from this, the most preferred color to the slightly darker color. These two color deteriorations usually happen during the DFD condition. So as a customer who is purchasing meat from the wet market in Kerala or in the country as a whole, they are not concerned about this color deterioration, as well as there is no practice of storing the meat for longer periods. The usual practice is cooking of the meat. So because there is no stress on the color as well as the shelf life of the meat, there is not much importance attributed to the welfare of the animal, and the meat having better color or longer shelf life is not sold at a premium price. So the butchers or the meat handlers or the animal handlers are not resorting to any welfare practices. So any welfare practices, if there are legislations that even there is defective enforcement of these welfare measures, and so that is a situation. So the pre-slaughter welfare greatly affects the meat color, shelf life, and quality and processing properties. So there, as I told, there is incentive for the meat processor who produces meat of better color and longer shelf life. And this scenario will change. Definitely this scenario will change once the proportion of the meat that is being processed into value-added products is increasing. Then this scenario will change, because when the meat is consumed, meat is converted into value-added products, there is of course a high stress placed upon the quality of the meat, because the meat has to be stored. The meat becomes important, as well as the microbial quality. The microbial quality of the meat also will become more important when the proportion of the meat that is getting processed into value-added products is increasing. So that scenario is slowly happening in Kerala, because nowadays there are some startups coming who are selling the chilled meat. So the chilled meat is being sourced from slaughterhouses. So from the slaughterhouses, when they source the carcasses, their microbial quality becomes an important problem for them, because they cannot chill the meat for more than 3 days. So the meat gets spoiled. So in that scenario, they are more concerned with the microbial quality of the meat. So what I'm telling is that once the value-added products, or once further processing of the raw meat is happening within the state, you are bound to observe the regulations, then observe the standards, and you are place more stress on the safety aspects as well as the quality aspects of the meat. To the post-mortem examination. So as we all know, that is some basic only. So post-mortem examination is not like an autopsy, because the procedure may be the same, but the objectives, with respect to the objectives, they are different. It is more important to correlate what is whether the lesion has any influence on the edibility of the meat, whether the lesion is generalized or whether the condition is acute or chronic. So that is what the meat inspector is looking at, rather than specifically arriving at a disease situation. Say, for example, he will be looking at an abscess, and he can diagnose it as a liver abscess or a lung abscess, but a meat inspector will be looking at that abscess has caused micro abscesses in other parenchymatous organs, or whether there is any signs of generalization. So that is very important with respect to autopsy. And in capacity building programs for veterinarians and all, we always transfer this information to them, because unless they are very clear about their objectives, they cannot effectively implement the process of meat inspection or the post-mortem examination. And another difference is that in cases, we may not be getting the pathognomonic lesions, because the lesions might not have been fully developed. Mainly, it may be intermediate between the normal as well as the pathognomonic. So in many of the cases, you will not be able to see fully developed lesions. So that also has to be borne in mind while doing the post-mortem examination. So what we should look for, localized or generalized, or whether it is acute or chronic, and determine the effect of the lesion on the edibility of the meat, rather than going for the exact cause of the disease. This is more important. The other one is also important, but important is this one. So the traditional meat inspection is always organoleptic. That is, we have already seen that the inspection that is happening in slaughterhouses in slaughterhouses. In many of the other developed countries also, it is traditionally organoleptic based on the senses. That is viewing, palpation, olfaction. These are the senses that are commonly used. And incision, if required, is also used. So traditionally, it is organoleptic in nature, and the facilities for this post-mortem examination, it is there will be an inspection point in the slaughterhouses along the line of slaughter, and that inspection point will witness the arrival of the carcass, the viscera, and of the animal in a synchronous manner at one point, so that all these three components can be inspected simultaneously or at one point. So that requirement is there, and light requirement as well as water requirement should be there, and there should be a qualified veterinarian. And instruments, of course, dissection instruments as well as ink for stamping the carcasses are required after you take appropriate decision after inspecting the carcasses. So I have about the objectives or the primary objectives of doing post-mortem examination with respect to the animal carcasses, and I'm just giving some of the basic principles which are already known to you, just highlighting some of the principles. That is carcass, because these principles has a huge bearing on the challenges that we face. That is why I am highlighting these principles. So identification of carcass and the offal of the corresponding animal is very important, because you cannot complete the meat inspection without examining the offal organs, the viscera, as well as the carcass. So the carcass, as a thumb rule, the viscera and the head should remain identifiable with the carcass until the inspection is complete. Then viewing, palpation, okay, that is already been told. Then establish whether the condition is localized or general, and coordinate all the observations of ante-mortem examination and submit samples for diagnostic support. So these are the general principles or the thumb rules for the post-mortem or the post-mortem examination of the carcasses. And now challenges. So what are the challenges that we face? So this itself tells the whole story. So you can see that because of the of basic infrastructure facilities, as I told in the initial few slides, highlighting the transfer of bacteria from the environment, from the hide, from the floor to the carcasses, causing human health implications. But the actual scenario is just the opposite. That is, it is just too unsatisfactory, grossly unsatisfactory. Okay, so slaughterhouse infrastructure is one primary situation or primary problems facing the hygienic production of meat in India as well as in Kerala. So what happens is that modern slaughterhouses or slaughterhouses on the modern lines proposed and usually proposed. So it will be largely wholly mechanized, catering to the requirements, say for example 120 or 150 animals per day, and during a span of, say for example 5 hours, happening in the early hours of the day. And such project proposals also envisage utilization of these facilities by a private party during off hours. That is, when the custom slaughter is over, they will go for utilization of these facilities for their purpose, that is for production of meat for their own purpose. So such projects are being mooted, and many times what we see is that the facilities that are installed at such slaughterhouses, I'm telling about the service slaughterhouses, not the integrated abattoirs which are maintained by private parties. I'm telling about the local body owned service slaughterhouses, which is the main subject of this discussion. Okay, because majority of the meat that is coming to the market are from such slaughterhouses. So the infrastructure facilities that are installed at such places will be remaining non-utilized after a period of time. So that is a primary observation seen in most of the cases. So we have just analyzed the reasons for that, and we have arrived at some of the conclusions, which are that proper consultation process has not been taken place before establishment of houses with the stakeholders, because the stakeholders include the butchers of the area. And if the butchers are, if there is a dedicated team of butchers, say for example, 10 butchers who are working in a slaughterhouse, receiving animals, slaughtering the animals and transferring the carcass back to the trader. So that will be a dedicated team of butchers, and even such butchers have not been properly taken. Sometimes they are apprehension. They are having apprehension that the new infrastructure will result in loss of job for them. It is a threat to their job security. It is a threat to their routine practice of slaughtering. It will impart more stress on the animal, more stress on the butchers for completing the work. Sometimes more number of laborers will be required. Sometimes the wastage of the meat will be more. Such apprehensions are always there for the butchers whenever we moot an idea of a modern slaughterhouse. So if proper consultation has not been taken place, there is always a chance that the facilities at the slaughterhouse will turn to be or will become unutilized, and they will again resort to the traditional floor slaughter that you see in this picture. Okay, so issues to be addressed in the upgradation of service slaughterhouses we see. So we have to address we have to go for basic requirements rather than going for extremely sophisticated equipment. So these are some of the basic requirements. So there should be a facility for lifting the animal or hoisting the slaughtered animal. Then blood has to be segregated or collected in separate containers, and collection of GI tract and emptying of paunch contents need to be away from the dressed carcasses. And collection of the pluck means the thoracic organs. So they have to be collected and they have to be presented for presentation. They have to be presented for inspection. So in a service slaughterhouse, you don't see anything of this happening. There is no facility for hoisting the animal. So there is no facility for collecting the blood in the containers. Blood is being simply let out into the drains. They will go along with the fresh water or the wash water. It will just overflow to the nearby homes, causing a lot of local dissent. So there is no provision for GI tract emptying. In many places, the GI tract is emptied within the slaughter hall itself. In a very few places, there is a manure bay provided outside the slaughterhouse where you are emptying the GI tract and the paunch contents. Okay, and the pluck is not presented for inspection also. So these are some of the basic requirements, along with immediate removal of the hide from the slaughter floor, which is also not happening, because you can see in many of the places the hide being piled up in one corner of the slaughterhouse, and it is not being removed from the slaughter hall. Then water connection with hose pipes. Even the basic facility of a running water facility in many of the slaughterhouses. Instead, they will be using a water tank from which they fetch water by some containers. So progressively, the water in the tank becomes progressively more and more contaminated. Then unloading ramps are not available. Then layerage, as I told earlier, sufficient facilities are not available. And solid and liquid waste removal or management not happening. And there is not even a compound wall with gates. So as a typical example, I will tell you what is the importance of compound wall and gates. Of course, it is to keep away the pests. So just take the example of stray dogs. So stray dogs, with respect to, say for example, hydatidosis. So hydatidosis is a condition which is if the human beings consume hydatidosis, nothing will happen, because the larvae are not effective to the human beings. They are effective only to the definitive host, that is the dogs. So but what is the public health significance of hydatidosis is that hydatid affected organs will be disposed of by the butchers to the outside. If not properly seized by the meat inspector, they will be disposed to the outside, and it will be consumed by the dogs. And within the dogs, the echinococcus will develop, and the life cycle will persist. So of course, one of the primary approaches for preventing this cyclozoonosis is disrupt the life cycle and treat the final host. So that is not happening if dogs are getting access into the premises of the slaughterhouse. So a simple thing which, like construction of a restricted premise using compound walls, is not happening in many of the slaughterhouses, resulting in access of pets as well as dogs to the vicinity of the slaughterhouse. Okay. So going through some of the important design principles which generally which need to be observed whenever we go for the design of slaughterhouses, or when we go for modernization of the slaughterhouses. So again, I would like to highlight that I'm not talking about very highly sophisticated slaughterhouses. Maybe the options for modernization of existing or service slaughterhouses I'm talking about. So the flow of operation, whenever we go for the design of the slaughterhouses, there should be a proper flow of operations from less clean areas to clean areas. So if the process of slaughter is not happening according to this flow, what happens is that there will be unnecessary movement of the carcasses as well as the personnel, as well as the byproducts from different contaminated areas to clean areas. So a proper design process should be followed to observe this rule. Then flow of people. Hello.
Hello, Dr. Vasudevan. If I can just suggest, if you can just speed up a little, I think you can just if you can speed up a little, I think
yeah, of course.
We're running short of time.
Running out of
Please.
time. Okay.
Yeah, please.
Keep
Go
these
ahead.
issues. Okay. So I'm telling about these issues to be addressed because issues to be addressed when we propose modernization of slaughterhouse. So these are the issues to be addressed. As I just mentioned initially, does the new facility ensure the job of the butcher? What is the incentive for observing the animal welfare measures? Then do the design facilities suit the butcher's requirements? That is, are the time and duration of slaughter meeting your requirements? So these concerns need to be addressed when we move the facilities, the construction of a new slaughterhouse. So for example, within 3 hours, they have to slaughter 60 animals and without the process of stunning, especially for religious slaughter purposes. The requirements are met by the new slaughterhouse that is being constructed. Okay, are the equipments user friendly? Then that is the hoist for hoisting the animals, the cradles, trolleys, whether these equipments need to be user friendly. And do the butchers have to substantially alter your slaughter practices? So whether they need to alter their slaughter practices substantially, then do the facilities make your work more or less strenuous? So are you able to complete your work irrespective of the speed and skill of other butchers? So say for example, in a line system of slaughter, if what happens is that if at one location, if the butcher or the person who is doing the job is not that much skilled, there will be a delay in the movement of the carcass at that one point, and that may result in holding up of carcasses, the animals to be dressed subsequently. So that will result in a delay. So whether it is possible to complete your work irrespective of the skill and speed of the other butchers, so that need to be clearly clarified to the butchers. So all these are concerns from the part of the butchers, because butchers, as we know, they will not wait for any time with their animal to be slaughtered outside the slaughterhouse. Everybody wants to get their animal slaughtered immediately. So there will be a lot of unrest, delay in the slaughter, that is in the slaughter procedures. So these things have to be properly addressed. Then only we will be able to convince the stakeholders, including the policymakers, butchers, as well as the public, regarding the requirement for a slaughterhouse having basic facilities. Some of these sophisticated can be established, need not be always, all the equipment, all the facilities need not be state of the art. SME modern type of slaughterhouse need to be established. So without that establishment of that sort of, I'm telling about establishment of slaughterhouse because without that, the whole process of meat inspection is not possible. It is not virtually without this facilities, the meat inspection is virtually non-existent. We can say that. Okay. Next, so for proper meat inspection, one thing I have told is that the infrastructure facilities created by the modern slaughter facility, and another is capacity building in meat inspection. So capacity building programs should be directed towards some of the like this, that is differentiation of acute and chronic or generalized and localized conditions. Then we have to transfer the information about different lesions which you most probably or most frequently encounter in an organ or in a tissue. So this is somewhat related to the risk-based meat inspection, which is the most common, which is the most recent concept that is coming up, which involves all the stakeholders from the farm to the fork, including the producers, the transporters, the butchers, as well as the consumers. So that is RBMI, risk-based meat inspection, that is happening. And here, this is one of the principles, that is, when we examine the carcass, or when we examine the when we do the meat inspection, we have to have a clear idea about a tentative list of diseases which are going to be encountered in that organ. Say, for example, this is masseter muscle. So when there is FAO has clearly said that in all the developing countries, there should be 4 or 5 parallel incisions made in the masseter muscle on both sides to detect cysticercosis. And so if we incise the masseter muscle, it is what we are expecting is cysticercosis. Say, for example, another thing is lungs. So if we are examining the lungs within the Kerala context, what are the lesions that we commonly observe? There may be, of course, deviations, but we can observe, we can expect pleurisy. The pneumonia, we have seen that. Abscesses we have seen. Then parasitic cysts we have seen. So these are some of the common ailments or the observations that you encounter in lungs. If kidney is in, what are the different things that you observe? There may be necrotic foci seen on the kidney. There can be infarction, which is a clear indication of generalization if there is any associated abscess in the carcass. So what I'm highlighting is that with respect to any organ, any tissue, there should be a list of most commonly encountered diseases. General pathological conditions. I am seeing one. I am showing one animal, live animal, and examination. You can see a very common observation in pigs, that is abscesses that are seen. So most of these abscesses will be superficial, and in some cases these abscesses would show signs of generalization. So whether this animal will be categorized as a suspect animal during antemortem, and during postmortem examination, you have to clearly differentiate whether it is whether there are any signs of generalization. So what are the signs of generalization? You have to, the inspector has to be very clearly informed about the signs of generalization. So we go for signs of generalization by changes in the lymph nodes. Then we go for going for micro within the parenchymatous organs. We go for conditions like color changes or changes in the circulatory, like congestion or hemorrhages in organs. So say, for example, see incomplete bleeding in a carcass. So a carcass is found to be having a red hue. Red color is more. So it is generally maybe due to incomplete bleeding, or it can be due to septicemia. In that case, how to differentiate this normal condition, that is imperfect bleeding is not pathological, it is normal. So how to differentiate it from septicemia? We have to clearly impart. So it is by looking at the parenchymatous organs for any particular hemorrhages. So that is the importance of observing the carcass, the organs, as well as the head at one point for arriving at the meat inspection judgment. Okay, so lymph node examination is also very important. So this is the retropharyngeal lymph node. So I'm just going a bit fast. So lymph nodes. So we give the in capacity building programs, we give the specific instructions regarding the lymph nodes. So lymph nodes are actually any lymph nodes will be draining from an area of the carcass, and any abnormality in that area will be reflected within the lymph node. So that is the importance of examining the lymph node. You need not go to examine all the lymph nodes. Okay. So within a carcass, there are more than 30 or 35 lymph nodes that are present, but it is not possible to inspect all the lymph nodes. So we usually advocate to examine 5 or 6 basic lymph nodes. One of the lymph nodes that is most important is the iliac lymph nodes, external iliac and internal, because iliac lymph nodes reflect changes in the pelvic cavity, changes in the hind limb. So many areas changes will be reflected within the in the mammary gland. So these will be reflected in the iliac lymph node. So say, for example, differentiation of chronic and acute mastitis. So chronic mastitis means the changes will be localized to the supramammary lymph node, and if it is acute mastitis, subsequent lymph node will be showing changes. So lymph node examination is also very important, and in capacity building programs, this is usually highlighted, because in many conditions like tuberculosis and all, that the lymph nodes give valuable indications about the spread of tuberculosis within the carcass, whether it is of recent origin, whether there has been repeated dissemination of the mycobacteria to the circulation at different periods. So all these indications can be obtained from observing the lymph nodes. Okay. So size, color, and consistency of course varies. One important thing is that, say for example,
sorry to disturb, Dr. Vasudevan, if you can
Okay.
push a bit more fast.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Finish.
we are running
Four
short
or-
of time.
four-
Yeah.
4 or
Okay,
5
okay.
slides.
Please proceed, please.
Okay. So continuing with the challenges, it is difficulties in enforcement of the PM judgment. It is that is, even if the carcasses are totally condemned, there is no facility in the prevailing situation to segregate the carcass and ensure that the carcass is not going back into the food chain. Okay. So unless there are detained meat room or condemned meat room that are established in slaughterhouses, which are usually components of modern slaughterhouses, which are chilled facilities. +4 degrees centigrade is the temperature that is maintained in such rooms. So if there are no such facilities, most probably the carcasses will go back to the food chain through the illegal route. So enforcement of PM judgment is not that easy, because postmortem usually happens at the wee hours of the day. The veterinarian will be there and asking the butchers to condemn the whole carcass without any support of the law enforcing agency will become very difficult. So usually the experience is that butchers will actually agree with partial condemnation. Say for example, condemnation of the liver or a portion of the leg, they will agree, but total condemnation of the whole carcass will usually meet with severe protest from their side. Okay, so some of the key weaknesses of traditional meat inspection systems. So as I have told initially, the not possible to inspect a group of animals as well as their carcasses on a risk-based or priority risk-based approach, because that means there is no transfer of information from of the animals through the intermediaries to the destination where the animals are slaughtered. That is, whether that farm is situated in an area which is showing signs of contagious disease outbreak, that information is not passed. So what I am telling is that the information that is not being to the processing or the slaughter facilities, so that there is no prioritization of the risk that can be expected in such animals. So no prioritization is happening. If the animals are brought from Coimbatore or from Palakkad or from any other place, all the carcasses are viewed having the same risk of encountering foodborne pathogens or animal diseases. So that will result in missing some of the situations, which is a which will result in risk to the public health. And current antemortem postmortem macroscopic inspection is not able to detect the high priority biological hazards. So the answer is to go for a risk-based meat inspection, as well as proper examination of the animals or routine examination of the carcasses as well as meat for the presence of the pathogens. And manual handling of the meat, including use of palpation or incision techniques, usually will sometimes result in spread of the bacteria to the other parts of the carcass. So it will sometimes result in imparting higher risk than minimizing the risk. So that is also a hazard. And the associated with the animal production systems as well as the meat production systems are taken at in identical levels by the policymakers, because the risk of contracting a pathogen at the production system is different than the risk that is possible in a slaughterhouses, whereas these are usually viewed as the same. So there should be separate protocols or separate regimen for the risk management at production levels as well as the processing as well as further processing levels. So these are some of the deficiencies of the current meat inspection systems. And I'm going. So we can say that the current meat inspection procedures in India are effective. Obviously, it is very less effective, and reasons include lack of regulatory enforcement I have already explained that regulatory enforcement is lacking, and poor infrastructure is there, and veterinary service for inspection of animals and carcasses is insufficient, and there is awareness deficits from the part of the consumers, then butchers, and the the animal producers. So there are awareness deficits also. Then a more risk-based meat inspection may be better suited. But as I told you, this risk-based meat inspection collaborates all the stakeholders at different levels of the production from farm to fork. But that is only a distant dream or possibility in the Indian milieu, and it can be achieved only after achieving the other very basic requirements, which we have already discussed. So I stop at this stage. Thank you for your patient listening.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. N. Vasudevan. It was so interesting. Had it not been for the constraints of time, I would have just allowed you to take for another 1 more hour. See, but again, the teacher in you has come in full bloom, because as you've been talking about, you don't feel like stopping, because you're just flowing through. Because I will just limit. I have to limit the questions to 2 or 3 questions from the audience. Before that, I would like to make some suggestions or some clarifications from the presentation before I give the mic to the my co-chair. See, and I think I just take the statement. Correlations are very clear, but the outcome is not really satisfactory. That is one good statement you have made, because that is all the time we feel like that. That you are correlating or making some statements, but nothing is really happening. And regarding the regulations, what you told in the last slide, we have a few regulations in force. I think the PCA Act 1960 is one of the regulations, and your Municipality and Panchayati Raj Act in 1994 is another regulation. And also this one, Water Pollution Control Act in 1974. I think these 3 acts are the ones with which normally we encounter when we go for a slaughterhouse design. I think if there's more to add, I think you can just put a point on that. And of course, it was really interesting to know that drying is much better than having a soil coat and going for a slaughter. I think that was new to all of us, because people always think that just wash the animal with that wet condition, you just go and take it for slaughter. Probably that may cause more problem than not to wash it. I think that was a good statement. That it's a piece of information. And one more thing regarding the traceability, you have a traceability of pig population, the pig slaughter. You are doing it in your plant. But can I just ask you one thing? Did you ever find some problem in pig, the carcasses which we have examined on ante-mortem, or the carcasses we evaluated? And have you given any feedback to a problematic animal, to that particular owner, that there is a problem with this, for them to be alerted? That's one of my questions. And I think your post-mortem, everything is there, and the rest of the things you beautifully explained. Just I want an answer for this particular question regarding the pig thing. And your service slaughterhouses, you have mentioned about service slaughterhouses also. What does it really mean? Is it a normal slaughterhouse or something else? Because people would be really interested to know what a service slaughterhouse means, because that terminology is supposed, words we know, but exactly what you mean by that, is there is something specifically called a service slaughterhouse? Yeah, with that, I think you can answer my query, and I'll hand over my job to my co-chair for the rest of the comments. Please, Dr. Vasu.
Okay, sir. Okay. Dr. Nandakumar, sir, thank you for your regarding service slaughterhouse. Service slaughterhouse is only a terminology. It is the slaughterhouse that is being maintained by the local bodies. So that is called a service slaughterhouse. That means local bodies, the animals will be brought to the slaughterhouse. The animals will be slaughtered there, and all the viscera, the carcass, and the hide, everything will be taken back by the butcher to his retail stall. So that facility is known as service slaughterhouse. Okay, only the rumen contents and blood will be remaining as waste in such slaughterhouses, and distal portions of the intestines, horns, and hoof also sometimes may be remaining. All the other portions will be taken back by the butcher. So that is a service slaughterhouse. You can see that there are around 47 authorized service slaughterhouses in Kerala, and most of them are in shambles. And some 7 or 8 modern slaughterhouses are coming up in Kerala using the funding. And the capacities differ. Maybe some are 50, some are 120 animals per day, like that, different districts. And in all these places, if the problems which I highlighted during my presentation, that is stakeholder participation, if it is not ensured, these projects are bound to create public protest, because Kerala is a thickly populated state, and you can see establishment of such slaughterhouses in such thickly are always bound to create dissent among the locals. So the stakeholder participation is of utmost importance. And whenever we consult with the policy makers of the local body, when we are invited to explain about these things, we always stress on this aspect. If you are not taking the butchers in confidence, if you are not taking the public into confidence that there will not be any issue of blood spilling onto your homestead, or there is the issue of foul smell, you are bound to meet with great protests. So that confidence, that stakeholder participation is of utmost importance. One thing. Second thing, regarding pig traceability, I use the term traceability, but we are not resorting to any mechanism to ensuring the traceability. So what I was telling was that we know where from the animals are being brought, and we, of course, we know the other farms in that area, and also we usually conduct the inquiries about prevalence of diseases in that area. Okay, and so that is how we ensure the traceability. So we don't have any RFID tags or something like that. We don't have any mechanism or any technology for ensuring the traceability. And of course, we used to give feedback. Typical example I will tell you: a farm in Thrissur district, they were having problems of chronic cough within the animals. And we also found increasing proportions of animals having bronchopneumonia, that is the anteroventral consolidation of lungs, bronchopneumonia happening in such animals. But the animals, there were no signs of generalization. So we have actually transferred this to them, and I think they have contacted the local veterinarian, because they were thinking that it is due to the dust from the field. So it was something like chronic cough, but we transferred the information that it must be infectious, otherwise it will not be affecting so many number of animals. So we transferred this information. So that was one area where we could give some feedback. So I think those are clear, sir.
Fine. And I would request my co-chair, Dr. Ramya, to just give her thoughts in this regard. Please, Dr. Ramya.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Vasudevan, sir. You have elaborated very nicely regarding the different inspection techniques like antemortem and postmortem inspection in a detailed manner regarding the procedure and requirements of inspection. And then you have addressed very nicely regarding the issues and challenges that we are facing in meat inspection. And with the help of, I think, with the help of NGOs and some of the governmental organizations, we can take care of the meat inspection, and we can enforce the meat inspection procedures. So sir has also elaborated very nicely regarding the issues to be addressed and design and important principles of slaughterhouse, and they are very nice and informative, sir. So I hope with the help of government we can, and with the help of some of the schemes, we may take care of all these issues, sir. And sir, one of my doubts is there any free bank system in India, sir? At any place of India, free bank system?
No, we don't have such systems.
So I think if it is there, I think it will be somewhat better to take care of all these issues, sir, so that there will not be any illegal activities.
Okay.
Anyway, it's very nice lecture, sir, very nice and informative. Thank you, Dr. Vasudevan, sir, and thank you, Dr. Nandakumar, sir. And I want to extend my thanks and gratitude towards organizers for making me part of this session. Thank you, sir.
Generous words. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And Dr. Vasudevan, it was indeed a very good lecture. You feel like talking again and again, because the content was so informative, and the way you talk was also very expressive. And in fact, we would like to hear more from you in other, if people have any queries, probably you can just put a word through a mail, or even you can call by phone and ask for more information. I think it was a really good session that we have shared. Dr. Ramya had done a very wonderful job. Dr. Maya has been coordinating that, and Dr. Isha, the henchman of this particular program. And I think this session is going to end now. I think if anybody has got to ask something, over mic, You can just ask within a few minutes because we have to wind up. We have stolen the next speaker's time. Almost 15 minutes we have stolen, but we cannot steal more. So if I can just wait for 30 seconds for a question to be asked. If there are no questions, we'll wind up the session. And one more thing regarding that chat box, you find all those attendants been marked in the chat box, but no queries have been marked. So I think it would be better if you can just give some space for chats again for only questions, and the attendance be marked in a separate, like in a WhatsApp something. That would be easy for the people to just go through. That's my suggestion. Probably in future you can just take care of that. If no more questions, I think we will wind up the session. Let's call it a day. That was a very good, interesting session. Thank you so much for our organizers for giving us a chance to chair the session. And Dr. Vasudevan, congratulations for the good lecture. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm very pleased that the College of Veterinary and Animal Sciences and the Indian Veterinary Association are organizing an international webinar on the World Zoonosis Day that marks the successful use of the rabies vaccine way back in 1885 by Louis Pasteur. As an alumnus of the college, I would have loved to participate in the webinar, but I'm sorry that I will have to miss it due to other commitments. Despite the remarkable advances the medical sciences have made in the last 135 years, it is sad that we are still facing the coronavirus pandemic, the latest devastating pathogen that spilled over from animals. I'm sure that the presentations and the discussions you are having at this meeting will be very informative, and I wish all the success for this webinar. Thank you.
വെറ്ററിനറി കുടുംബാംഗങ്ങളെ, വിദ്യാർത്ഥികളെ, COVID-19 എന്ന മഹാമാരി നമ്മെ മാത്രമല്ല ലോക ജനതയെ ആകെ ഭീതിയിലാഴ്ത്തി പടർന്നുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്. സാഴ്സ് കൊറോണ വൈറസ് 2 എന്ന ഒരു തരം RNA വൈറസ് ആണ് COVID-19 എന്ന രോഗത്തിന്റെ ഹേതു. ഇത് രോഗികളായ മനുഷ്യരിൽ നിന്ന് മറ്റു മനുഷ്യരിലേക്ക് സമ്പർക്കത്തിലൂടെ പടരുകയാണ്. ആദ്യമായി ഇത് മനുഷ്യരിലേക്ക് എങ്ങനെ എത്തിച്ചേർന്നു എന്നുള്ളതിനുള്ള പഠനങ്ങൾ നടന്നുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്. പക്ഷേ ഭൂരിഭാഗം ശാസ്ത്രജ്ഞരും ചിന്തിക്കുന്നത് മൃഗങ്ങളിൽ നിന്ന് തന്നെയാണ് ഈ രോഗം മനുഷ്യരിലേക്ക് എത്തിച്ചേർന്നത്. ഈ വരുന്ന ജൂലൈ 6 നമ്മൾ ലോക ജന്തുജന്യ രോഗ ദിനമായി ആചരിക്കുകയാണ്. മഹാനായ ലൂയിസ് പാസ്റ്റർ പേവിഷബാധക്കെതിരായിട്ടുള്ള വാക്സിൻ ആദ്യമായി ജോസഫ് മീസ്റ്റർ എന്ന പേരുള്ള ഒരു 9 വയസ്സുകാരനിൽ ആദ്യമായി വിജയകരമായി പരീക്ഷിച്ചതിന്റെ ഓർമ്മ നിലനിർത്താനായിട്ടാണ് നാം എല്ലാ വർഷവും ജൂലൈ 6 ജന്തുജന്യ രോഗ ദിനമായി ആചരിക്കുന്നത്. നമ്മുടെ കേരള വെറ്ററിനറി ആൻഡ് ആനിമൽ സയൻസസ് യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റിയുടെ മണ്ണുത്തിയിലും പൂക്കോടുമുള്ള വെറ്ററിനറി കോളേജിന്റെ കീഴിലുള്ള വെറ്ററിനറി പബ്ലിക് ഹെൽത്ത്, സെന്റർ ഫോർ വൺ ഹെൽത്ത്, സ്കൂൾ ഓഫ് സൂണോസിസ് എന്നിവയുടെ ആഭിമുഖ്യത്തിൽ എല്ലാ വർഷവും സ്കൂൾ കുട്ടികൾക്കായി ഒരുപാട് പ്രോഗ്രാം, സെമിനാറുകൾ, എക്സിബിഷനുകളാകട്ടെ, ക്വിസ്, അതുപോലെ പോസ്റ്റർ കോമ്പറ്റീഷൻ, ഡ്രോയിങ് കോമ്പറ്റീഷൻ, അങ്ങനെ ഒരുപാട് കോമ്പറ്റീഷൻസ് പരിപാടികൾ നടത്താറുണ്ട്. അതുപോലെ വെറ്ററിനറി ഡോക്ടർമാരുടെ ഇടയിലും IVAയുടെ ആഭിമുഖ്യത്തിൽ നമ്മൾ വളരെ ഭംഗിയായി തന്നെ ലോക ജന്തുജന്യ രോഗ ദിനം ആചരിക്കാറുണ്ട്. ഇത്തവണ നമ്മൾ വിദൂര സാങ്കേതിക വിദ്യ ഉപയോഗിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് സെമിനാറുകളും മറ്റു കോമ്പറ്റീഷൻസും സംഘടിപ്പിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. ഏതായാലും നമുക്ക് ഒത്തൊരുമിച്ച് എല്ലാവരും ഒത്തൊരുമിച്ച് ഈ രോഗത്തെക്കുറിച്ചുള്ള ഈ ജന്തുജന്യ രോഗങ്ങളെ കുറിച്ചുള്ള അവബോധം സൃഷ്ടിക്കുന്നതിനും അവ തടയാനായുള്ള മാർഗങ്ങൾ സ്വീകരിക്കേണ്ടതിനെ കുറിച്ച് ജനങ്ങളിലേക്ക് എത്തിക്കാനും ഒത്തൊരുമിച്ച് പ്രവർത്തിക്കാം. അങ്ങനെ ആരോഗ്യകരമായ ഒരു സമൂഹത്തെ കെട്ടിപ്പടുക്കാനായി നമുക്ക് ശ്രമിക്കാം.